Recording in progress.
Thanks, Anya. So good afternoon, folks. Just wanted to thank you all for joining us this evening. I know you all represent several different neighborhoods, so we appreciate you all, sharing your thoughts and your opinions and time with us. We have been to real quick as by way of introductions. My name is Taz Lagu. I'm also joined by Anya Federmack, Judy Johnson, and Catherine Shore. We are all members of the Chapel Hill Planning Department, had various tenures with the town, but we're all town staff and working towards this housing choices proposal, which is obviously the hot topic for the evening. The goal of tonight's meeting is primarily to hear from y'all. We are very interested in hearing your thoughts and your concerns about what's been proposed so far, and also how we can move forward, right? What improvements you would like to see to the proposal, and really how we can all kind of make this as good as possible as we move forward. It's all very much still a work in progress. We are not at all wedded to or committed to any particular part of this proposal. We want to hear from you before moving forward. We're using a webinar format for this meeting, and so I apologize that you can't see each other at the moment. Once we are done with just kind of our introductory staff materials, you'll each have an opportunity to use the raise hand feature and share your thoughts or comments with the group. I can kind of let folks know how many people are on at any given time. Right now, I think we've got about 12 attendees and then the 4 of us from staff. Yeah, we've just found that this is a helpful way to manage the meeting. We're going to go ahead and get started with a quick presentation from Anya, and then we will lead into questions and comments from y'all. So Anya, please take it away.
Sounds good. Just give me 1 second here. Okay, are you all able to see the full screen? Yep. Okay, sounds good. So thanks again, everybody, for joining us tonight. I know this afternoon we sent you some handouts about the different housing types that we're proposing and some additional information. And so I'm going to try to keep this presentation very high level. Once I finish giving you a little bit of information about the project, I will put those handouts as well as links to the project website and public input into our chat in this Zoom meeting so that you all have it. But here's the schedule. And this fall we started meeting with the different advisory boards and council. We went to council again in the winter, and then this is basically where we are. We've been hosting lots of different community open houses and neighborhood meetings like this one. Back in February, we asked the council to close the public hearing to give us a chance to sort of restart the project. We were hearing a lot of public comment and and the need for more engagement. And so we wanted to make sure that we gave ourselves the time to do that. And so as we continue this spring, you'll see that we'll probably be offering additional community outreach opportunities, a council work session, and then there's the potential that council could take action. And so looking at the schedule, again, here's kind of where we are. Going into April, we're going to be having more neighborhood meetings. Potentially April 10th, we're tentatively set to talk with town council at a work session. And this date's really important because we need to have them give us some direction on how we move forward from here. And so depending on what council direction is, you may see that the council opens a public hearing again in May, but that's tentative and it's not a done deal. And so with that, I would just encourage you all to continue to follow along, and that we will try to make sure that you stay informed via email, blasts, and other communications that the town puts out. So the purpose of the text amendment is really to clean up the land use management ordinance, or the LUMA, which is the zoning ordinance. We want to update some of the height and setback exceptions to incorporate contemporary needs such as EV charging stations. We also want to create opportunities to integrate missing middle housing forms into the existing residential neighborhoods. And if you've talked to us before, you know, when we're talking about missing middle housing forms, we're really focused on triplexes, fourplexes, cottage courts even. We, through zoning, cannot control income levels. And so for us, missing middle is about the building type and the building form, not who lives there and how and what their income level or the cost of that missing middle housing unit is. We also want to increase housing production by identifying some of the barriers that have prevented the development of housing, such as accessory apartments and duplexes and other smaller scale multifamily residential developments. We also want to make sure that we are encouraging compatible infill development, both in established single family neighborhoods and as well as the town's three local historic districts. And then we want to identify ways to strategically and sensitively increase the density through incremental development. So we don't want to encourage something that's going to happen overnight, but rather something that happens over time. So the text amendment's really broken up into two pieces. And so the first part, again, is that setback and height exceptions. The LUMO currently does not have definitions and development standards for townhouses, and that's something that we really need to move forward with. And then we want to update some of the standards around duplexes and move the definition or move the development standards out of the definitions when it comes to accessory apartments. The bigger piece of this, and the piece that you're more interested in, is part two, these opportunities to increase missing middle housing. And when we're talking about that, it's the triplexes, the fourplexes, and cottage courts. Under the current proposal that we had shared with the council back in January, these would be allowed in most residential zoning districts. We're also interested in removing the density limitations and instead focusing on controlling density through things like a minimum lot size, setbacks, height, and so forth. And then one of the things that the future land use map envisioned was to allow triplexes and fourplexes to be approved through a process like that of single family development, where it's done administratively and not necessarily through advisory boards and the town council. So we've had quite a bit of public engagement so far, and this is a very high level list of what we've heard so far. So we've heard from the different neighborhoods about things like student housing, nuisances, infrastructure capacity. There's been some concerns about out-of-town investors, demolition, even the displacement of existing residents. And so this is the list that we've created thus far. So I'm going to stop sharing and we can take questions. Like I said, I will add the handouts as well as the links in the chat. And if you are interested in giving us some feedback, you can use the raise your hand tool at the bottom of the screen. I also know that a lot of you shared the Zoom link, which is fantastic. So I think if you right click on your name, it allows you to change your name, and that might help us keep track of who's provided comment and who hasn't. So with that, George, you are the first one to raise your hand. I'm going to move you in so you can speak.
Mute, join as panelist, is that it? Okay.
You got it.
Okay, can you hear me? All right. I have a question. I've been very puzzled. I listened to the recording of the town council meeting, and people are asking for more housing, affordable housing and stuff. And the thing that's puzzling me about this proposal is that it seems to me that when we talk about affordable housing, which I guess you're not supposed to be talking about, right? Anyway, about infill, middle housing and stuff, they're expecting, a lot of the people who support this are talking as if they're going to own housing in this missing middle stuff that's built. They're somehow imagining. There was one woman who lives in Westwood who talked about living there and how she had to move out or live away, and then she wants to come back and live there, clearly as an owner. And I looked at what's her name, the town councilwoman there, Stegman, And she does use the word ownership. She used the word renters once. And I don't think we're talking the same thing. I mean, if you think people want more housing, well, I can't disagree, but I think people want more ownership. And I guess the thing that really, I'll tell you, the one thing that sticks in my craw is, especially in a neighborhood like ours, I live in the Kings Mill neighborhood, is why are fourplexes being proposed? I like duplexes, triplexes, they seem okay, but a fourplex feels like A, rental, and B, developer. And I mean, if I owned a duplex once in Austin, Texas, it was fine, I had no problem. And but the fourplexes, I mean, the material you sent around makes the fourplexes look really nice. Their parking's in the back. You know, there's none of this torn up gravel in front, except for one picture that was a little more realistic about what happens. And I don't want, you know, all that gravel and loss of vegetation and stuff. A duplex, which is, I will guarantee you, going to be one owner and one renter if the owner stays there, is not going to be two owners. You're not increasing ownership for these people. And I just wonder if you've heard if people are distinguishing it. It seems very poorly expressed to me. And I will say one little sort of emotional thing here, if I'm not, I guess. People, you know, you've seen Jeff Green and all these people get up and talk about how our covenants were racist, and ours were. The implication, of course, is we're racist, which I find deeply offensive. And I mean, I can show you my neighbors, all that kind of stuff. And the key to the house, my neighbor is not, you know, who's a person of color. I mean, it's just deeply offensive. And the other feeling that's a little strange to me is when you buy someplace, you really want it to stay the same. You don't want it to change. I mean, that's normal. It isn't racist. It isn't, I don't know what all. And I just wanted, I don't believe we've heard that kind of accusation from you, the planning board, or anything like that. I'm not saying that. I'm just telling you that that's deeply offensive to me. So discuss.
George, thank you very much for those comments. I'll take the last point first, just because I think it is really important to mention it, right? We are not at all operating under the assumption or the belief that anybody that opposes this is doing so out of any sort of ill will, certainly not out of racist motivations. I think you will hear folks talk about the origins of some of these policies. And we, to the extent that we engage in that sort of discussion, I think we very much want to make sure that we're doing a good job of distinguishing the policies from the people. It's one thing to say that there are, you know, racist or other problematic origins to the policies. It's another thing to say, or to cast any sort of aspersions on the motivations of people today. And we very much do not want to operate under that assumption. We know everybody that's weighing in on this is doing it because they care about this town, and they're doing it in good faith. And so thank you for raising that issue. And it's certainly a belief that we hold.
Right. Thank you. I was most offended by Jeff Green, who got up and just read a racist covenant at the last meeting and sat down. I mean, give me a break. But so I thank you, Tass. I appreciate that.
Yeah. I think going into the home ownership versus rental kind of dichotomy, right, of which way this would likely fall. If we promote more missing middle, are we going to see more home ownership or more rental? I think that's something that I think to a certain extent it's a goalpost that has been added to this debate that we have not necessarily started out with, right?
Wait, what's the subject? What's its ownership?
The ownership versus rental
Okay,
question, right?
thank you.
We see more missing middle. It certainly could create more opportunities for home ownership.
Yes,
We do not argue that it is guaranteed to create more opportunities for home ownership. We see it as a possibility. Whether or not we ultimately see, you know, a massive uptick in either home ownership or rentals, certainly remains to be seen. I think you've mentioned some very good points that suggest that things could sway more towards the rental end of the spectrum. But ultimately, we see that our kind of our main priority, right, is to diversify the new housing that's coming online in Chapel Hill, whether or not that ends up being owner occupied or rental. We see more diverse housing options as a good in and of themselves.
I do too. Yeah. Yeah, I think I just say, is there any way you can remove the fourplex part of it?
I will say it is all on the table right now.
That's what I would really like to see.
Yeah. Everything's on the table. We are considering just how much sense it makes to put fourplexes in R1 or R2 districts. It's all very much on the table.
Okay, I will say one thing. There's beautiful housing, and for example, on Mason Farm Road, what the university has built for the students, that's spectacular, beautiful. The parking is underground. You know, it's dense. It's fantastic, and I think lots of more dense things can be built. I don't see how they could be done in our neighborhood without really destroying its character in a lot of ways. But I think I mean, I'm not even particularly offended by the big buildings along in the whatchamacallit, that over by you know, Elliott Road and all that kind of stuff. But as long as it's with underground parking and stuff like that, it can be very nice. But I just don't want, you know, when you move into a good neighborhood like this, and you know, we've been here 43 years now, you kind of like it to stay the same. And the town's planning on putting a bridge across Morgan Creek, or about 100 yards from Morgan Creek. We're not opposing it. You know, let people come by as long as they're not driving motorcycles and stuff, you know. So anyway, I'll let you go and get the next people.
Thank you, George.
Thank you.
Yeah, thank you so much. Okay, so I'm going to move you. I'm not sure how I'm going to move you, George, but I'm going to try it.
I mean, I can disappear maybe somehow. I don't know.
If I lose you, forgive me and just relog in, okay?
Yeah, sure.
While I figure that out, I'm just going to mute you and I'm going to let Michael in. Hey, Michael, can you hear us?
Oh, actually, I think it's me.
Hi, Wendy.
Hey, it's Wendy Ramsden. So, and I've got you on my phone because I couldn't figure out how to do this on my computer. Put it in a drawer so you can't hear me. So I do live in Morgan Creek. I am, just to speak up at the beginning, I am fine with an increase in density. I believe that the reason our neighborhood was laid out the way it was because everybody was on septic when it was built, but now that we're all in Wausau, it does seem like there are a lot of smaller houses on fairly big lots, and that we could actually accommodate a bit more density. So I'm actually fine with that. I had a couple questions about how this really works, and they're really more clarification questions. So we've got the NCD, and it's you know, it doesn't mention not allowing duplexes or fourplexes or triplexes, but I suspect that was because that was not an allowed use in the underlying zone at the time, and so it wasn't specified. So even though we're an NCD, would those sort of multiple dwelling units per lot apply? And if you have the minimum size lot for our NCD, which is 0.6 of an acre, could you still put a fourplex on it or a threeplex? I mean, just something more than one unit.
Wendy, thanks very much for that question. It's something that we are certainly mulling over in terms of how the ordinance would be written, the overwhelming and I think the guiding principle that we plan to implement is that these text amendments are by no means intended to change the status quo in the NCDs. And so we need to work out exactly what that mechanism would look like. But the intent is very much to make sure that we're not creating some sort of backdoor change the uses that are allowed in the NCDs. We anticipate that, you know, the NCDs, like you mentioned, were largely written with the intent of remaining single family, and we are by no means trying to upset that with these housing proposals.
And my next question is, it sounds like you don't have a real definite answer for that at this point, but and that's okay. My next question is that a lot of people in our neighborhood own their own homes, and you know, I would assume that that's the intent, even if you were allowing more than one house on the lot, like a duplex or a triplex. What would home ownership look like then? Because you would have maybe like the minimum size lot, the 0.6 of an acre. But if you've got more than one household on that, you can't subdivide the lot into a smaller size without being non-compliant. And so would there have to, I guess I'm wondering what the home ownership option would look like. Is it a condo kind of like agreement, or I don't know what that looks like.
So I think we can look at it and explore it in a few different ways. I mean, one, we're proposing this cottage on a compact lot to allow people to, if they do have a larger lot, that you could subdivide it and have an option where you could create a smaller lot with reduced setbacks and a smaller home on it. So that'd be one way that you could get then two ownerships. I think there's also like the condo option that you were discussing. And I mean, possibly even like a townhouse option if you had just like two attached single family homes, right? So I think there are different ways to encourage the ownership, but not guarantee it because we can't do that.
I was going to say, but it would be possible then to have an ownership, and it wouldn't have to be one person owning it all and renting out the units. It could actually be individual ownership for the residents. Yeah.
Yeah, it could be. It just doesn't have to be because we can't mandate that.
Okay. All right. Thank you.
Thank you. Okay, I'm going to move you out, Wendy, and I'm going to move Kathleen in.
Yeah, hey, this is Kathleen. Thanks a bunch for doing this evening gathering. I sent a letter, I guess it was just yesterday, and I am happy to kind of restate what the question is in it, but if that makes the best sense. But I suspect you all have seen that letter, and it talks about who's going to do the building and whether developers will be involved. Would it be best for me to try and restate it, or do you want to go ahead?
Yeah, I think for the benefit of the group, Kathleen, if you wanted to share in whatever way you think is appropriate, whether you just want to talk about it in broad strokes or read the letter itself.
I think like other people on this phone call, it sounds like I'm very supportive of middle income and low income people being able to live close to where they work. And so the challenge is when I hear about the plan, the only clear way that I see that this would happen in general is that developers would have access to purchasing land. They would develop that property. And I don't think at all that developers have the interest of our town at heart, or potential low-income people or potential middle-income people, much less the environment that we live in, the trees, etc. So what I am asking people to consider is taking the developers out of the equation. I mean, you can't do that 100%, but the question is, could a different strategy be used to try and fund the project that needs to happen? And the proposal that I was kind of wondering about is creating a fund that individuals could invest in or foundations could invest in. And the people who are making those investments are agreeing to a relatively low return on their investment. In exchange, they have a large social investment in that, and the fund is created in such a way that there's stipulations put on. Well, first of all, that means that the money to purchase this land is owned, let's say, by the town or someone who represents the town. And then the town dictates, in this neighborhood, there's this kind of structure that we have deemed appropriate in potential conjunction with neighborhoods. And then the town owns it, and the town can sell that property once it's built, a duplex, a single family home, whatever it is. And the stipulations can be such that the persons who purchase that property are the occupiers of that home. And if they sell the home, then it goes to the next person who occupies it. So it's hard for me to be able to verbalize this, but I think that the issues are, if the town has the money, the town does the purchasing, there's an agreement that kind of incorporates all of the things that we really want, is owner occupied homes, ability to build equity. And then, of course, then you hire local builders to do the building according to the stipulations of the town. It seems like this could be a win-win-win. And I'm wondering if you can just kind of comment on things that you could see with this, or things that would be difficult.
Thanks a lot, Kathleen. It's a really cool idea. I think basically it sounds like a socially conscious REIT, right? A real estate investment trust. And yeah, I mean, it's a really interesting model. We are, I think it underscores some of the difficulty that we face as planners on a regular basis, and that we want so badly to be outside the box thinkers, but we are very much living in a world of constraints. And one of the biggest constraints that we are constantly having to think about is understanding what's the boundaries of the town's authority under state law. And generally speaking, right, the town is not able to do things that it doesn't have some sort of express delegation of authority to do from the state. One of those things, for example, is regulating who or whether a property is occupied by an owner, right? We can't say that a property has to be owner occupied or it has to be rental. That's just something that state law, which is kind of the source of all of the town's authority, just doesn't allow us to do. And one kind of, appendage to that principle is that if we're not allowed to do something through regulation, we're also not allowed to do it through other means, right? As, by creating like a real estate investment portfolio or something of that sort. And so it limits what we're able to do. So that model that you've suggested, I think it's a really good idea. And I think we would love to find ways to, within the boundaries of what we're able to do, I think we would love to find ways, if somebody else was willing to take on that challenge, whether it's a nonprofit or some other organization, we would love to find ways to support efforts like that through kind of the limited cards that we have to play.
Okay, I think I understand. And let me just ask, because have you heard of foundations or nonprofits? I mean, I recognize Habitat is specifically for low-income people, low-income housing, and and you're talking about middle-income housing. Is there anybody else reaching out to you with this potential proposal, or are you reaching out to anybody else to say, could you make this happen?
Yeah, it's not something that we've explored yet. We've got groups like community home trusts that do land banking and other similar that have other similar types of programs. Like you mentioned, a lot of them are more geared towards lower ends of the income spectrum. But yeah, I mean, if there are groups out there, we would be very happy to try to work with them and see how we can support them.
Okay.
And sort of the reverse of that too, I would just mention that we have been reaching out to a lot of the affordable housing partners we have in the community, as well as the town's housing department, just to talk about, what can this text amendment do for you? Can it, where are you seeing implications? Is this something that's helpful as you're thinking about creating affordable housing? Are there barriers? And so we are trying to think about it holistically.
Thank you so much. Yeah. Okay. All right. Back to thinking more. Thank you.
No, thank you.
Kathleen.
We appreciate it. Okay. I'm going to ask that if you've already spoken, just make sure you put your hand down because I know several of you have the same name. So M. DeBrune, you are up.
Can you hear me?
Yes, we can.
Okay. Thank you for organizing this. When you originally scheduled this meeting, it was going to be just with our neighborhood. And I had sent a letter on the 17th of January with about 10 questions that I thought would be very interesting to have answered. And I understand you probably don't have the time now. So what I'd like to know is, can you answer those questions then and send them to me so that I can share the answers with my neighbors?
We're generally not able to answer the list of questions. As I'm sure you can imagine, the man hours needed to be able to do that is pretty significant. I would point you to, I think Anya has already dropped a link in the chat to kind of the general project site that holds a lot of information about the proposal. There's a pretty comprehensive list of frequently asked questions on there. And what we found is that we've been building out that list of questions and answers in large part based on lists like what you've shared earlier. And so I think you may find that many, if not most of the questions have been addressed in some way, shape, or form through that frequently asked questions list. But we're also happy, if there are any particularly burning questions from that list, we're happy to try to address them this evening.
Okay, because I don't think they were all answered in the things that you put out. I'll just try and pick out a couple of those questions then. The drawings on the slide used by the town to illustrate the types of new buildings don't show how the maximum number of additional cars would be accommodated. So can you provide drawings to help us visualize how 4 to 16 additional cars on a lot would be handled?
Yeah, I think we can. We are, again, if the man hours involved in those drawings are not insignificant, but we can definitely make sure that we're as we're preparing future graphics, whether it's for town council meetings or additional public engagement, we can. I think the point that you're making, I think, is very well taken, that we need to do a better job of illustrating what some of the impacts could be, especially in potentially like a worst case scenario, right? Showing that spectrum. And so we can definitely take that into account as we prepare, whether it's the next round of graphics or whenever we are working on that. So thank you for that.
Okay, another question is, let's see, where is it? Could the town council carry out a trial for this proposed rezoning to see whether it does result in more affordable housing or more middle housing for a few years, and then do that in 2 or 3 neighborhoods, and particularly in neighborhoods that are a little bit different from Elkin Hill, which is, it's a neighborhood that's all hilly. It's got a lot of hills, and there's a lot of concern in our neighborhood about the cars that are already here driving too fast, because a lot of children streets older people are walking. I mean, there's a lot going on in our streets. And if we had a lot of lots that were built with multiple houses on them, the traffic would increase considerably. And so the question is, are you looking at the characteristics of different neighborhoods and whether it would be appropriate? And could you do a trial in some neighborhoods and before expanding this to the whole town?
That's a really good question. And we have, we've heard from a lot of folks, right, this idea of, would it be possible to do some sort of a pilot program? And I think it's difficult because ultimately a worthwhile pilot program allows you to learn lessons that can then be applied more broadly, right? And I think it would be really difficult to take lessons learned from one particular neighborhood in Chapel Hill and say, this is definitely going to be applicable throughout town. That being said, I think we very much understand that there's going to be some learning, a lot of learning, right, to be done. And so one of the things that we have been very strongly committed to, that council has been very interested in, is making sure that if or when these housing reforms get passed in some form, that there is very close monitoring of what the outcomes look like. Making sure the council is very well informed about what the impacts are so that they have all the information that they need at their disposal to know whether they need to adjust course, right? We've seen that sort of really robust reporting just next door. For example, Durham is really closely tracking all of the new building permits, all of the tear downs, everything that, you know, the useful metrics, right? They're closely monitoring and reporting back to their city council members so they can, if they need to, adjust course. And I think that that's exactly what we would hope to do, or very much not hope, that we would very much plan to do with this proposal as well. And so it's not like a geographic pilot, but it's kind of a time-based pilot that we would implement, see how it works, and then adjust course if needed.
So so if I understand you correctly, it could not be a proposal where certain neighborhoods are left out of this proposal because of their characteristics.
Yeah, again, the notion that we would try to, you know, find one neighborhood that's going to be like a laboratory, right, for this, I think would just be really difficult. And we see the close monitoring of implementation as the kind of the better approach to this.
Okay, I will send my letter to the town council and see if they can give some answers to the other questions, but just one last one then. There's no guarantee, is there, that after this is adopted, which I assume is probably going to happen, that after that, the town council couldn't vote to rescind the NCDs?
Yeah, I mean, the NCDs are something the council is able to vote on. Yeah, it's a legislative decision for them to make.
So they could do that.
It's certainly possible, yeah, but it
Okay.
is by no means something that we are proposing as part of this proposal.
No, I understand that, but I just wanted some clarity on that, and I'll send the other questions in to them. Thank you.
Yes, ma'am. Thank you.
Thanks. Okay, we're gonna move you out, and I'm gonna move the first Michael with the hand raised in.
Hello, you hear me?
Hi. Yes, we
Hi.
can.
Don't mind the babies in the background. They just got home. So thanks for doing this, and I appreciate you all taking the time. I don't mean to deflect from our neighborhood. I live in the Kings Mill, Morgan Creek neighborhood because my wife and I are, you know, very much advocate for higher density housing wherever we can find it. I think it's more important that people have homes that they can afford than we have, you know, whatever else. However, again, not to deflect from our neighborhood, but there has been some talk in our neighborhood about across the highway from us. There are tons of completely vacant, I believe they were formerly graduate student housing. And I think that one of the reasons I heard, again, this is all hearsay, is because of the fire alarm or smoke alarm system. Has there been any discussion with the town to take bids to bring those up to code and to convert them into this? I mean, it seems like, I think it's Mason Farm Road. There are dozens and dozens of units that are surrounded by a chain link fence, and I'm sure they're in disrepair, no doubt. But I'm curious, has there been any discussion about, hey, let's take bids to make these existing structures into affordable housing?
Yeah, thanks for that. I think you bring up a good point. So those are UNC owned property. And this town obviously exists because of the university. But it's also, and so it creates an enormous opportunity for the town. It also creates challenges, right? That a major chunk of town is owned by an institution that isn't regulated by the town in the same way, and that very much has to be a partner in what we do, but can't be, we can't force them to do really anything. And so, I think we have not heard from UNC that there is that there's a strong desire or really ability to build more housing at this time. And so unfortunately, that's just it's not something that we've seen is particularly on the table at this moment.
Has it been broached, or are you just, because it sounds, the way you're phrasing it, it sounds passive, which is fine if that's what it is, but has the town broached it with UNC?
Yeah, I don't know if they've broached the topic of those properties in particular. I will say we are, in constant coordination with UNC, generally speaking.
Right.
And again, we have not heard or seen any signal from them that they are able to be building more housing or really invest much in housing on campus at all.
Okay. Yeah, I'm not talking about building more. I'm talking about the giant structures that exist already. But yeah, okay. I appreciate it. Again, I appreciate y'all taking the time and yeah, thanks.
Thank you.
You're welcome. Okay, so I'm going to move you out. I know we got several Michaels with their hand up, so forgive me if I pick the wrong one to come back in. Oh, sorry, Michael, I let you back in. Okay, the next Michael. See, I'm going to ask you to unmute. Are you able to unmute?
So it says the host would like you to unmute. So
Yes, we can hear
okay,
you.
thank you. I'm Lauren Hinn. So maybe this is Michael because he shared the link with us.
Yes.
Okay. So I also live in Kings Mill Road. Just an observation is a lot of houses in the neighborhood are still connected to septic, and there's a huge cost, huge unsubsidized cost to get into the sewer system. So that's an ongoing issue for the neighborhood. One question I have, just in a specific question, is, do you know what percentage of the town land is under current NCD?
I don't know that we ran the percentages on that one. I know we've got, I think, is it 13 NCDs? Some of them are more complicated, like Glen Lennox, that's regulated by a development agreement. I can say that over 70% of the town is zoned for either residential 1 or residential 2, which is pretty limited to allowing only single family. But we didn't look at the percentage of NCDs only.
Okay. And then with regards to the NCD, I I thought I heard Taz say that under the current NCD, if there's a 0.6 acre limit for single housing, then you could not put in a triplex. Is that correct?
I'm not quite sure what you'd be referring to there.
Oh, okay. The Kings Mill Morgan Creek NCD has a 0.6 acre minimum for a home.
Mhm.
And the way I think everyone interpreted that means a single home, not a triplex or quadruplex. So under that current regulation, those other modifications could not occur. Is that correct?
Sort of. So it's again, I think as Wendy brought up earlier in the call, some of the NCDs, they don't clearly prohibit things like triplexes or fourplexes, because at the time that they were written, it wasn't even, on the table that something like a triplex or a fourplex would be allowed. And going into this proposal, we very much wanted to operate under the general principle that we don't want to change what's allowed in the NCDs. And so again, we still have to kind of figure out exactly what the mechanism to enshrine that would be. But the goal is very much to not change what's allowed in the NCDs.
Okay. And then in terms of collecting data in the town, there's been a very large number of apartment buildings, private student buildings, condos built. Does the town have data on how many are owned, what percentage of the residents are registered to vote, how many are students, how many are commuting to the Triangle? I mean, any sort of those types of statistics to get a feel for what that new modern housing is attracting to Chapel Hill.
So I don't know that we have it to the level of detail that you're looking for, but the town has commissioned several housing studies recently that do talk about the number of residents that both live in Chapel Hill and work in Chapel Hill versus how many commuters are coming in every day, how many folks are leaving for work every day. There's some numbers in there about the number of new housing units and like the age of the different units. So let me find those for you and put it in the chat. They're pretty detailed reports, so it takes a little bit to read through them, but I will find those.
Okay. Thank you.
Thank you. Looks like we've got another Michael that I can bring in. Oh, no, I think that's actually the same Michael. Hold on, give me 1 second, guys. Okay. The newest Michael to be brought in. If you want to unmute, and we'd love to hear from you.
Are you asking me to say something?
Yes, please. Yeah, we can.
Sorry,
can
I'm not familiar with this system. My name's Asta. I live on Kings Mill Road, but more broadly speaking, under this new proposal, what is to prevent, and I know this has happened in Raleigh, I believe it's happened in Fairfax, Virginia, and other places, what is to stop a developer coming in to a neighborhood that does not have the same kinds of protections that we have, and doing tear downs and building not middle income housing at all, but very expensive housing? And looking at all the apartments that have been built in and around Chapel Hill, and the Blue Hill district, frankly, is a disaster when it comes to traffic. If anybody has driven it recently, I drove it today. It is already so congested and it's going to get worse. Are those all rental units? Is there any possibility of ownership in any of those apartments? And the rental, because I've checked, the rental costs are high. If you want to rent an apartment there, you're not middle income.
Mhm.
So I'm really not at all convinced that this is going to solve a problem. I'm all for mid-level housing. I'm all for greater density. I think these are very important, and I'm all for having many more mixed neighborhoods. I lived in an apartment on MLK Boulevard, and one of the things I loved was having a lot of different kinds of neighbors, and it was great. But I don't see, I mean, where has this worked? And I'm just not convinced. Sorry about that.
No, it's nothing for you to apologize. We want to, we don't necessarily, our goal is not to convince, it's to discuss and to try to work through these issues. I think you bring up an excellent point, right? That I was talking earlier about some of the constraints that that we're working with. One of those constraints is that we cannot mandate what the rental rates of these properties will be. We can't mandate what sort of price they are sold for if they go that route. And so it is very much true that this missing middle housing proposal cannot guarantee that new housing types that come in under the kind of the umbrella of missing middle are going to be targeted at certain income levels. We can't guarantee that, and that's why I think, have been very specific about the terminology, right? And so when we're talking about missing middle housing, it's really focused on the form of housing. We're not talking about middle income housing. We think, and we have, there is reason to believe that when you make it more possible to build smaller units, there's at least an opportunity for those to be more affordable, but it's, as you've mentioned, it's by no means guaranteed. It is truly about creating more diversity in the housing stock, with the intent that creating more choices, it at least opens the door to greater affordability. But we certainly, do not suggest that it guarantees affordability.
And I've been in correspondence with Karen. I've known Karen since before she was born, actually. And she was a good friend of my daughter's, and I've worked with her father. So I know her well, and I know that this has been very carefully considered. But any ordinance that is passed, any changes that are made need to be very carefully considered, and plenty of time taken to get it right. And I think one of the concerns of some of the people in this community, myself included, is that it's been moving too fast.
Mhm.
Slow down, get this right. Don't make the mistakes that some other communities have made. It's not just a question of listening to the community, it's a question of having the experts draw the right documents, and just slow down. Thank you.
Absolutely. Thank you.
Okay, so again, I would just ask that if you've already spoken, please make sure to lower your hand, because that kind of helps us keep track of who's given us feedback. So we don't have any more hands raised. We do still have some more time with you all. Oh, Tim, thank you for raising your hand. Let's move you in. Hi, Tim.
Can you hear me?
Yep.
Okay. I'm assuming that the problem that we have in Chapel Hill, meaning we're a smallish town with a huge university with thousands of students, thousands of employees who reasonably would like to live in the town, that Chapel Hill is not unique in that problem. I'm thinking of Ann Arbor and Madison and places that I assume are similarly set up. And I wonder if either there has been or there could be research into ways that other places in a similar circumstance have dealt with, to see if anyone's come up with any smart ideas, that we just haven't thought of.
Absolutely, Tim. We know that we are, piggybacking off of the work of smarter and more experienced planners from other communities, and we're certainly looking to learn from them as much as we can. We've been meeting with planning departments from a lot of other municipalities. Just the other day, we were talking to the planning department from Iowa City, which seems far away and very different, but they're a college town of about 70,000 people, and have a lot of the same dynamics and constraints that the Chapel Hill has. We've talked to the folks at the planning department in Oxford, Mississippi, another kind of southern college town, and we're continuing to reach out to other similarly situated towns around the country to learn from them.
Okay, thank you.
Yes, sir.
All right, so if anybody else has any feedback that they'd like to give us, please raise your hands. I'll also make sure that we have Taz and mine and Catherine's emails in the chat for you here in a minute, so that if you have additional things that you think of, please email us. And I don't know, Taz, do you have anything else you want to add?
No, other than to just say thanks for showing up, folks. We're constantly learning from y'all, and we really appreciate your involvement in this.
So let me put our information here in the chat for everybody. And so I think, like we mentioned, we'll have your email addresses for those that registered to attend the meeting. And so we'll keep you informed of any upcoming meetings that we have through public input. There's also currently a survey on public input that I believe is open through Friday. And the public input forum also allows all of you the opportunity to just write comments in the chat. So that might be helpful to some folks as well. But yeah, we'll just give you guys a few more minutes if anybody thinks of anything. Otherwise, we can wrap up early. Oh, Kathleen, do you have another comment? We'll move you in. And then after Kathleen will be Michael.
Yeah, of course, I've already spoken, so just cut me off if I have. Taz, it sounds like you know a little bit. I don't know. I've heard that REIT, right, kind of thing, but where is it that someone, me or someone else, could look just to say this has happened before, and how could we find out who'd be interested in structuring something like this?
I've really got to profess my ignorance there, Kathleen. I don't have a good answer to that, as far as who or if somebody has done kind of this socially responsible but still market-based investment strategy. That's just something
Okay.
I don't know. I'm sorry.
Okay. All right.
I was going to suggest you talk with George Barrett with the Jackson Center. They have been working for many years with UNC and the UNC gave a $3 million grant to the Jackson Center, or loan, and they've been using it to buy property. But George Barrett with the Jackson Center I think, is a good place to start.
Okay, all right, good. I'm happy to try him, but I wonder if it makes sense for you all to try him too. So just something to add on to your list, which I'm sure is so short. Thank you.
Thanks, Kathleen. Okay, Michael, who I think actually was Lauren, would you like to speak again? Oh, whoops, I just took you out. I'm sorry.
Okay, yeah, this is Lauren Hintz again. When this link was shared with me, the person in Originator was talking about collecting questions and sharing them with you. I don't know, has there been a list of questions from Kings Mill that was shared with you? Or has that happened a couple weeks ago, or no one had questions?
Yeah, no, there has been a list of questions that's been shared. Yeah, there has been a list. I think it largely mirrors a lot of what what y'all will find in the frequently asked questions list that's on the town's website that Anya shared a link to.
Okay,
yeah,
thank you.
Hey, George, I see your hand is raised. There you go.
I can't, can you hear me?
We
Yes,
can
we
hear you,
can.
George. Yep.
Okay, well, I guess you don't get to see my pretty face, but I just have one question. This isn't about this exactly, but if there's any time, we have been voting in Chapel Hill for decades or more for council people who say we want affordable housing, and then we don't seem to get enough. And we see things like the Berkshire on Elliott Road with all those beautiful oak trees chopped down and blah blah blah, and it seemed to. I may be wrong, Steve. I may be factually ignorant about stuff, but is there any affordable housing there? Is there affordable housing in all those buildings that are being built down that way? I mean, you may not know that answer, but I'm just, it's something that bothers me because we seem to keep asking for it from developers. Do we get it?
Yeah. So the Berkshire and some of those other properties down there, they're part of, as y'all I'm sure are familiar, the Blue Hill form-based district. And my understanding is that there actually is not an affordable housing requirement for properties in that district. The town does push for other large-scale developments outside of that area to commit to providing some share of their units as affordable, whether they're for sale affordable. Like, for example, just last week, the town council approved a townhome development up on Homestead Road. 15% of those units are going to be affordable for sale units.
Oh, good. Okay.
Yeah. So the town is pushing in the ways that it can to get some more affordable units online as we see new developments, and we're always looking for more ways to get more.
I don't know, I'm not interrupting you. I just wonder why it hasn't happened. I mean, our neighborhood has a neighborhood forum for town council people every year at the Morgan's place since, I don't know, a couple decades, I swear, and everybody's for affordable housing. And so I'm just puzzled after a while. So anyway, so thank you. I appreciate it.
And not to point blame to Raleigh too often, but affordable housing is it's yet another issue in which our hands are not entirely tied behind our back, but at least one of them is. So like,
oh, no, I'm well aware of that. I know the problems with the university, and I mean, I wish the Carolina North could be turned into a huge park or something maybe with some housing around it. I don't know, but yeah, I know they've got us. The university's got us. There are some political problems. A lot of the problems with housing too has to do with income inequality.
Mhm.
And I imagine Chapel Hill can't do much about it. So, yeah, thank you.
Which just going to add a bit on the affordable housing in the Blue Hill district. As Taz indicated, it's a form-based code district. So it's, as long as you build to that form, we have to, it's a by right. You're allowed to build that. So what the town did is they created that district off of Legion Road behind the cemetery there. There's 2 affordable housing districts or developments that have gone in. Greenfield Place in Greenfield Commons. It's about 150 units. I think roughly 75 senior housing and 75 family housing. That is in the Blue Hill district through the tax incentive structure that was set up there. With the new development, we're obviously getting more property tax. We worked with DHIC, which is a local affordable housing developer, and the town gave that land from the cemetery to DHIC to build those affordable housing. So in essence, the Greenfield Place and Greenfield Commons is the affordable housing for the Blue Hill district.
Oh, I got you. Okay.
So there, it was very much part of that whole district. It's the affordable housing.
Okay, I see. It'd be nice if the people were mixed in a little bit more. I like mixtures and stuff, but yeah, good. Thank you for your answer. And thanks everybody, by the way, for this today. It's been very helpful. And by the way, I even wrote notes when I was all pissed off listening to the town council things that what did I say about that I was so mad at Jeff Green for saying I was a racist and all that I wrote down. I think you wrote, Tass, I think you said you call it historical inequalities. And I thought, well, that's a good way to put it. There are historical inequalities and it would be good to do something about it, but no damn racist, man. So, okay, you can beat me out in your YouTube, and thanks so much.
Thank you, George.
Okay.
Thank you.
Thank you. Okay, Michael, if this is you, I see that your hand is up. So if you would like to add something, you're welcome to. I'm gonna, there you
Yes,
go.
this is not Michael. This is Sally Green in the also using Michael's Zoom link from the Kingsmill neighborhood. Hello, George and Lauren and others, Wendy. And thank you, Judy. I raised my hand before Judy came on. I was on the town council when we passed the form-based code, and we did pass the form-based code to define zoning in one area of town, not the whole area of town, but the idea was to jumpstart development in that one area because there had been no development there. But in that process, as Judy pointed out, we did invite DHIC to develop these 2 magnificent new apartment complexes. And the reason, it would be great to live in a world where all of the various income levels of homes were mixed like salt and pepper. But that's not the world we live in. We live in a world where the major way to provide affordable housing for people at 60% area median income and below is through the federal tax credit low-income housing tax credit program. And that by necessity involves putting them all in 1 or 2 buildings. It's just the way it works. And I'm actually proud of those developments, and I'm proud that they are in the Blue Hill district. Thank you.
And Sally, if I had known you were here, I would have called on you to answer that.
That's okay, Judy. Yeah, we both remember it well, and I'm proud of your work. I'm proud of your work with it too. Thank you.
Thank you. So I know so many of you have been using other folks' links. So we want to make sure that we're capturing you, and I want to make sure that if we're sending out communications that you receive them. So if you think about it, email me or Taz or Catherine just to say, hey, add me to the list so that we make sure that you're included. Okay, does anybody else have any comments that they'd like to share? Okay, well, I don't see any more hands raised. And so again, just the next steps are really for us to return to the town council tentatively on April 10th. So if you're on our list, we'll likely send out the copy of the council agenda, and that's a work session that's held over at the library. And it's really our chance as staff to take all the information that we've heard from all of you and the other neighborhoods and share it with council and suggest some recommendations on how we might move forward and let them give us some direction. So that, Taz, Catherine, I don't know if you want to add anything else.
Nothing else from me, Anya, thank you.
Thank you all for being
Okay,
here.
Before we hang up, M. DeBruyne, you have just raised your hand, so let me bring you in.
Yeah, your last comment just raised another question in my mind, that you will take all of the input that you've been getting and you're going to have the work session. Does that mean that there is any possibility that you would change this proposal before it goes back to council? Or are you just going to give them the same proposal and say, these are some of the comments we got?
No, I think you're gonna see that we're trying to take into consideration all the comments that we've heard, and I think we're coming up with a proposal that's going to show that we're pivoting.
Okay, thank you. That's very useful information.
Absolutely. And yeah, I mean, with the information that we shared with you tonight, this is the information that we've been sharing with all the neighborhoods. We want to make sure that we have a equal playing field. And so for that reason, the information that we probably presented is old information, because it's something that's we've been doing community engagement on now for a while.
Okay.
But stay tuned. So with that, I think we can probably end early tonight. So thank you again all for being very collaborative and cooperative, and we really appreciate you turning out for this meeting.
Thanks, everybody. Hope you all have a good night.
Have a good night.